Hi, I'm Alan, and I'm one of the instructors here at We Can Code It.
Hi, I'm Kendra, and I'm the admissions representative for the Columbus campus at We Can Code It.
Hi, I'm Lauren, and I'm the Student Success Program Manager.
Hi, I'm Lacey Nichols, and I am the Career Services Student Success Coach here at We Can Code It.
We're going to have you join us where we're going to teach you how to build web pages with
HTML,
CSS,
and JavaScript. Welcome back to our next video, and I'm with Kendra this time, and we're still in CodePen, which you're all familiar with. So we're going to do a different project, and we're going to have some fun with media queries. So we're going to make a navigation bar that will change sort of the style or the layout based on the size of the viewport. And I want you all to take a look at this website. I'm in W3 Schools here, so you want to pause the video and go to this website. We're going to grab this link to our font awesome icons. We're going to need to use this for our hamburger menu that we're going to create. So Kendra, are you familiar with the term hamburger menu?
Yes, it's a menu display that shows an icon with 3 bars. We see it all the time on certain web pages. So let's get started with building a main element as our container.
That sounds good, and we're going to just wrap most of our content here in this main container. The ID, again, as you know from the last video, with container will allow us to do some CSS styling. All right, so let's set this up here. And how many, Kendra, how many navigation items should we put in here?
Let's do 3: home, about, and contact.
Sounds good. So we'll have a logo, and then, as you said there, we'll put 3 navigation items in. So this should fit pretty well. So the logo can be anything. I'm just going to put some text in there for it. All right, so let's think about our nav bar here. It's going to be an unordered list, so that's why you'll see the UL element. And then we'll put basically 3 list items in here. And these have to be links. So I'm going to put a list item with an ahref. And we'll start with the first one that you suggested there, which is our home. And we'll close off the anchor tag first, then we'll close off that list item.
Why don't you just copy that code 2 more times?
That's a great idea. So we can just then replace home with the next nav item, and we'll do it twice.
So the coders at home understand the hashtag is a placeholder for a link to somewhere else.
It's absolutely right. Since we're just playing around here in CodePen, we're going to put basically like a dummy link in here with this hashtag, but you can link to specific areas or other pages that are on the web. Okay, so now that we have our 3 list items in our nav, you can start to see this come together there. I'm going to make sure we close these off. Everything has to have an opening and a closing, so we'll close this unordered list. And I think now we're going to look at this div here. We're pretty much done. We're going to close off that div. So there's our nav. There's our header. And finally, we'll close off our main.
So there's a little work to be done to make this pretty, and we can do that with our CSS.
And that's about it with our HTML. That's right, Kendra. We're going to move on and put some styling to this. Very simple. Not a lot going on here. We're just focusing on a nav bar this week. And I love CodePen because we can just see these visuals come together as we work. We're going to move this JavaScript out of the way. Let's focus on our CSS for now.
So let's get started by styling the container. Let's center this on our screen.
Before we center it, I'll just throw a little background color in there just to give us a little separation. And then as Kendra suggested here, we're going to center this. Max width at 90%. Make sure that we don't go too far out of our edges.
So it'll never take up more than 90% of the screen, and we're starting with a width of 1,000 pixels.
And there we go. So we have it nice and centered, 1,000 pixels, until we make, as Kendra said, our screen smaller. Then it will only take up 90% of our screen or our viewport. Let's move on to the header.
So let's justify the content with space between to get some good separation.
Yep, and there we go. We're going to use Flexbox. And as Kendra said, we're going to justify that content with space between. Now watch what happens. And as Kendra said, we're going to get some separation here. We're going to move the logo to the left and then our nav over to the right. Looking pretty good. Now, notice I'm going to focus on the header unordered list. So this is where we do the dot header with the UL. We'll put a flex container on that, or display flex on that. Now notice what happens here, Kendra. This is interesting. So our justify content, we're going to use space around to get some separation, but notice how nothing happens there. So do you see how the home, the about, and the content are still bunched up together?
Yeah, I do.
We'll center this here just to move it down a little bit, but we're going to fix this. Basically, there's no space for it to move. So watch what happens when we inspect this. And what I'll do is I'll hover over that unordered list. And notice what's highlighted there. Do you see the spacing? You see how it's really tight?
Yeah.
And we basically have about 168 pixels there. So there's no room to get any separation. So watch what we can do here. Let's make that unordered list a little bit wider by changing the width. And what that'll do is that'll give us a little bit more spacing. So now we actually have some room. So when we inspect this, notice how it pushed out from about 168 to 200. And it gives us a little bit of separation there.
Looks tons better.
So what do you think we should do next?
So let's actually remove those ugly bullet points and text decoration.
I agree with you there. We don't want to show that kind of content. So we'll maybe just change the font a little bit, make it a little bigger. All nice little tricks we can do with our CSS. And here what we're going to do is, as Kendra suggested, list style type of none. Let's get rid of those bullet points. All right, Kendra, we still have those anchor links on here, so we're going to handle those next. So notice what we're doing. We're still in the header, but this time we're not on the list item. Watch what I highlight here. I'm highlighting the anchor tag. So it's not the list item that has the underline on it, it's that anchor tag, and that's called a text decoration. So let's set that to none. So we'll remove that, looking a little bit better there. You can have some fun with colors if you would like. I'm keeping it really simple there. We'll just change that to black to match our logo. And there's our anchor tag. So we did a little bit with image hovers in our last video. Now we're going to do a little bit with anchor hovers here. Just a simple little change when we use our mouse. Hover over those nav links.
So we're going to make the background color darker and the font lighter on a mouse hover.
Sounds fun. Remember border radius from last week? So we can also soften the edges on the hover. And it will kind of look like buttons for us here, Kendra. What do you think?
Oh, I like that.
And that's our border radius. It's giving us those rounded edges. If I comment that out, we hover over, you get the square box. So that just softens that a little bit on the hover. We're going to do a little transition here. So I'm going to do this real slow just to exaggerate it. Notice this 2-second transition. And what that does is that sort of just eases in that hover. Well, we're going to make that about a half of a second. And it's it doesn't do much, but it just doesn't, it makes sure it doesn't just like really just pop immediately. It's just a nice little smooth mouse over. And just these little tricks that you can play around with in your CSS and just makes your web page that much more fun. All right, so what's next?
So we're here for media queries. What do we need to implement over our HTML?
Yeah, so we haven't done anything with media queries yet. We've basically just set up our HTML and we've styled it, but we have a nice nav bar. We need to add just a little bit of JavaScript in here.
So in essence, we're going to toggle over the nav menu to hide or to show.
That's absolutely right. We're going to have this sort of toggle trick going on here with our JavaScript, and we're going to hide and show that menu when we want to. What's cool about this is where that hamburger menu comes in that we mentioned earlier. And we'll be able to show that hamburger icon and be able to click on it, show our menu, click on it again, and it'll hide our menu. So we're going to do a little toggle here. So we'll pay close attention to what's happening with this JavaScript. And we're going to add in this icon class. And this is where that import or that link up above, that font awesome link, becomes important. And it's going to give us those bars or the hamburger menu that you see there. So notice that pops in to our nav bar. Not too bad, but what we don't want that to do is always show. So right now you can see it's actually there on our screen, but we don't want it there until we get to a smaller viewport, and then it should become visible. So that's where the toggle will come into play. So we're going to do some things with that next. So one small, simple update there in our HTML. We have this onClick equals toggle nav, and that's going to be a function in our JavaScript. So this is the first time that we've used our JavaScript window here, and this function has to be called toggle nav because that's the way we referenced it in our onClick command in our HTML. So we're going to build this out. So JavaScript is interesting, and what we're going to do here is grab an element. In this case, it's going to be our unordered list. So we're going to make a variable called navul, and we're going to call or reference document.getElementById, and we're going to bring that nav ID in here. And that's really important. So that's how our JavaScript is able to see that nav element that we've identified by the ID. So right now, notice we have sort of a nav menu that just shrinks in on itself when our viewport gets smaller. Well, that's not what we want. We want a media query on here. So we're going to style this a lot differently.
So let's start by hiding the hamburger menu.
Absolutely. So we don't want to see this hamburger menu right now. So that's the next mission that we have here, and we're pretty close to being done. We only have a few minutes left, and this thing will be fully functioning. So let's identify our nav icon. So we're going to specifically deal with that icon that's inside of that nav ID, and I've highlighted that so you can see where that's located. So right there on line 12 in our HTML, we do not want to show that until we're ready. So in a normal view, which is what we see right here, we're going to do display none. And this is what we'll call like our desktop view. So we can't see that icon right now. All right, our first media query. So pay really close attention to this code, and Kendra will explain to you what's going on.
So Alan, let me just make sure I'm correct. This media query will kick in when our viewport becomes 600 pixels or less?
You're absolutely right. So notice that at media screen and a max width of 600 pixels. So this code that we're putting here in our header will only come into play or will only kick in when our viewport becomes 600 pixels. So what we're going to do is pretty much line everything up vertically. So we're going to have one column of information. So we're going to do a flex direction of column, put everything in the center there in our header, and check this out. Watch what happens. So our content pops from being beside each other to being aligned. We're almost there. Watch what happens. When we hit 600 pixels, it becomes a vertical alignment. So we've got our header on the top and our unordered list on the bottom. So we're getting a little bit better.
So let's do the same thing with our list items.
Absolutely. We saw home and about and contact were still right beside each other. We also want them to align vertically in a column as well. So let's start with our H1, which is in our header. Just put a little spacing on there so it looks good, or maybe no spacing so that it kind of just lines up there right in the center. Do the same on our nav. Now let's go to a list item. And finally, this is where that icon needs to become displayed.
Oh, so the hamburger menu will take place of our list items.
Yep, notice how we do display none on those list items, but we display the hamburger menu. So watch what happens here. Go to 600 pixels, up, list item is gone, display none, and then we'll display that nav icon. So it now shows, and it's now relevant on our media query. So you can kind of think about 600 pixels would be something almost like what you would see on a cell phone. You would see that hamburger menu, and then folks would know, oh, I got to click on this if I want to see my options. So that's where our toggle will come into play. So this will be the final piece of the puzzle here as we finish this thing off. So we've got the logo. We've got the list items that are hidden by the hamburger menu. And again, this is only happening in our 600 pixel media query. So the final piece of this is we want to be able to toggle that hamburger menu to show our list items. And what we'll do is we'll show them in one column, just like we did with our other information. Notice nav.responsive. So what's happening here is we are going to toggle that button to turn on this responsive class or to turn it off. And so this will display it when we're ready. So notice how we test this here, and we can click on that and it goes away, click on it again, and our list items come back. And so there you go. We have a media query when we hit 600 pixels. We align everything vertically, and we can choose to show those menu options or to hide those. And so this would be a nice feature to add on any web page, and it sort of gets the ball rolling on anything else you'd want to do with the rest of your content that would be in the main body.
If you're interested in learning more about We Can Code It or how to be a full stack software developer, please visit our website at www.wecancodeit.org. Email us at admissions@wecancodeit.org or visit some of the links in our description. Thank you so much.